to knock on doors, you know, to basically like generate leads for the sales organization. And I was like, sure. And, you know, I show up and they're like, how old are you? And I'm like, I'm 16. They didn't ask for ID. So I was like, great.
Yeah.
And, you know, can you read this script? Sure. Let me read that. Okay. Got it. And, you know, was basically thrown into a van with a bunch of other, you know, old guys, 16, 18, you know, probably all drug addicts and weirdos. And, you know,
you grew up in Southern California, right?
Yeah. California, skate, you know, punk, surf, you know, hanging out, you know, riding bikes, and like knocked on doors and totally dominated that. And then did really well, and then was like, I don't really want to knock on doors. Is there a phone option? Ended up not doing that. Ended up going to work for like a telemarketing company at like 15. And then it was cool because I really was like, I had a mohawk and I had like earrings and purple hair, and they're like, we don't care, just get on the phone, right? So got on the phone. Always brought a lot of passion and enthusiasm. But didn't really start my first business, like business, like LLC, you know, banking account, all that kind of stuff till I was 19. And that was a collaboration with my brother. And we basically created a bunch of like affirmation products, right?
Very
things that we were doing in our own life, where we would take like, you know, the power of Baroque classical music and overlay affirmations on top of it. And it was stuff that we had done, you know, at 18 and 19 for ourselves. And then others started hearing about it and saying, can I get a copy of it? And we're like, hey, that's an idea. Let's throw together a little LLC. We'll create, you know, 4 or 5 products. And, you know, you got to get, like, it was ghetto. There was no website.
How awesome is that, though, right? How awesome that it was that kind of a scenario.
Get that. We would say, if you want it, call this number on this extension and leave your credit card. People did, right? I mean, it was like, could you imagine like leaving your credit card number on some young teenager voicemail, right? So we did that, and then, you know, basically in my early 20s, I was really lucky. I was working in my father's business. You know, it was not the typical environment like, you know, you're my son, so you get a free ride. It was like, you're my son, so I'm going to be harder on you than anyone else. You're going to get no shortcuts. You have to work more hours. You got to put in more time. And you're going to get less pay, right? Because I'm not going to have a silver spoon. Like he wasn't raised that way. He was raised with a tremendous amount of grit, and that was probably one of the best gifts he. But I just kept doing the work. Eventually exceeded him, became the sales manager and president. But along the way, we started, my dad and I, 9 different businesses together, right? So just that entrepreneurial bug, like that desire to...
Trying something new, right? Going on that new adventure.
Trying something new adventure, solving complex problems. And, you know, the mistakes along the way were plentiful. But the one thing I'm thinking about now is that early on, my biggest mistake was I would take a product and make it into a business. And the reality is that's not the case, right? I mean,
why is that not the case? Because somebody might think that's a great idea. You have entrepreneurs like, oh, I've got this idea, I'm going to make this product the business, as opposed to something else. What is that something else?
So there's a multitude of things behind it. First of all, I think any good business has to have, you know, you've got to have a low, medium, and high. You've got to have some depth in terms of what it is you can do for your customer. You're very vulnerable if all you have is a one-off. Like if all I do is this, I mean, now you could say like, hey, Sonos, is an amazing company. They do one thing, they do it exceptionally well. But here's the reality, like Apple and iTunes could do a little bit of technology on iTunes, and Sonos has got an issue. Right? Because let's face it, like
they just come in and take over that market.
They could but if you got a base of solutions for your customers, low, medium, and high, look at the companies that have failed because they just got isolated on one thing. Kodak. I mean, Kodak's probably the greatest example of someone that like really focused on one thing, did it exceptionally well. And do you know, like I'm sure you know the story that the digital camera was created at Kodak, and a guy walked in and said, I've got the solution. This is the future. We're not in the printing material chemical business. We are in the capturing of memory business.
But they wouldn't listen.
The Kodak board said, screw you. How'd that work out for them?
Yeah.
Right?
Well.
So
out of business.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of, you've got to have a wide variety of product offerings to be successful, right? To be able to serve a greater base. Each of those have to be exceptional products, but That was probably the biggest mistake early on.
And being willing to look at how to innovate to that next level. I did want to talk about your early experience again. So something I thought was interesting is when you were a 6-year-old boy, that very personal tragedy that drove you to find a solution. And I think that's something that for any entrepreneur, whatever stage of business, when you're hitting those roadblocks, you can just take that as a catalyst like you did to make something better out of what the scenario is and 100%. Find that new solution, and really can find a better solution and have that be your cutting edge. And then even like you said with your father, you got into a scenario where you weren't given it on a silver spoon.
No.
You actually had to work really hard and tough out some really difficult scenarios at that job. But then it led to the better character and the better performance down the road.
No doubt.
And being able to embrace those challenges. So I want to ask, fast forward a little bit more, what are some of the challenges that you face as an entrepreneur? And maybe you have an example of a challenge. And how have you overcome those challenges? As specific as you want to be.
Sure.
What is the challenge, and how do you, and then the principle that has allowed you to overcome the challenge?
So I can think of a lot of like major challenges along the way, that like 2 or 3 big ones. One that stands out for me was it was the end of 2009, and if we all remember the economy of 2007, 8, 9, 10, for some people even longer into 2011. In 2008, I remember saying to myself, I remember driving like through Orange County in Newport where I live, and looking around and saying, this doesn't look like a bad economy, but the whole world is basically
melting down.
Right, it's a disaster, right? And I remember just thinking to myself, so what could I do?
Right.
What could I do? How could I impact more people? How could I
At what stage was the business at that point? Where were you in the business?
So we came out of the gate in 2004, and by year 3 we were the number 3 player in our space out of 50 or 60.
Okay. So, what does that mean from a number standpoint? Number of coaches maybe, or?
No, I mean top line revenue. We were year 3 we were just shy of $10 million in revenue, and look, at the end of the day, 96% of all businesses don't get to $1 million. We were at 2.2 in year 1. We got nearly 5, and then we're like 9.8 or something like that in year 3. And now we're talking about 2006. And what showed up in 2007, 8, 9, right? Right. So actually, that wasn't the hard part for me, right? Like markets adjust. I was used to that. I got started in like 1989.
So
I bought my first house in '89. The market tanked. The challenge was, I came up with a concept to write a book. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to take the book, and I wanted to basically say, I wanted to take my entire business and basically say, if you buy a copy of my book, you can go to my seminar for free, right? So remember, at the time, I've got like 10 salespeople that make their entire living selling tickets.
The free ones you're about to give away.
Yes, right? And I've got a whole. So the intention was right, and I think the big lesson that people have to get is, as entrepreneurs, we really should only allot ourselves like 1 to 3 big ideas a year. And the problem is we usually have 7 to 10 a month, right? So I took this one idea, and the mistake I made is I tried to force it down the throat of the president of the company, my executive team, my marketing staff. Right. And the lesson was I just got resistance until I had to basically say, wait a minute. Every good idea has to be presented in a way that is beneficial to them, that is non-threatening to them, that ultimately, even in a perfect world, becomes their idea. Right. Because people will do far more with their own idea than they will with the command or the the order. We're not the military, right? So that was a massive lesson for me. And had we not done that, I don't know where we would be, but I know this: that next August, when we did our annual summit, we had 3,000 people there. Now, granted, it was for a $20 book, not a $300 ticket. Right. So from a revenue standpoint,
it hit revenue.
We got hammered. But what happened was, that book came out in 2010. It was a New York Times bestseller. It was, we had every one of the lists. It elevated our brand massively, right? So I basically feel like I gambled everything to basically elevate our brand. And in 2010, we were right back to where we were in 2006, and now we're 5x that. I mean, it's just it was the beginning of everything. But the mistakes I made early were just trying to force a good idea down their throat. And I know every entrepreneur watching this has done that before. Whether you'll admit to it or not, I don't know. Today, as the CEO, and I really don't run the company anymore, right? I've got an amazing executive team. Now, they basically say you get one a year, like one a year. And I had a big one last year, so like you don't get one this year, like you're done. And that's okay, because as an entrepreneur, you're always having ideas.
Right.
But here's the lesson. You ready? Every idea is a good idea, but what's your strategy?
Right.
Right? If your strategy is, we want to do this, we want to create this much revenue, we want to have this kind of service offering, we want to develop this kind of product, we want to have this kind of solution for people, every one of those ideas could be good, but they can actually be disruptive to the business.
Right.
And that was the mistake I was making.
Interesting.
I was actually hurting the company, not helping the company with all my ideas.
And if you have that main focus, a main goal, right? You say, okay, here's the things I want to accomplish. Yep. But as an entrepreneur, you're like, okay, I've got this idea and this idea and this idea.
Yeah.
And you start trying to implement these things. And then sometimes I've seen some of my very close entrepreneur friends where they're like totally shift gears into other industries that they maybe don't have experience in.
Because they get excited.
They get really excited, which that can be fantastic. But if it diminishes your ability to meet the main target, your main goal, maybe that's how you decide what's the priority.
Bingo.
And another thing that you mentioned was the listening to the people. The people who were saying, hey, listen to this is a concern, we can think about this in this way. And as entrepreneurs, sometimes we have that tendency to just want to drive forward with our idea because we have that experience of, hey, if I just go and I go for it and I try it, it'll work. But there is a temperance by having a team, right?
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, with your development of your organization, how have you found the right team members and built that team to be what it is today and be such a well-lubricated machine?
Yeah, I mean, thank you. I'm very blessed. I was actually thinking about something we created about 2013 that really got codified in 2014, meaning it was now a cultural way that we decide and do business. And that was a framework for our own management philosophy, which is we're a data-driven, consensus-based meritocracy. So I can come in with a great idea.
So tell us what a meritocracy is, right?
How you govern, right? That's all. It's how you operate, right? So, and I barely got out of high school, so that's a fancy word for me. But data-driven, obviously, what does the number say? Right. Is there a large enough total addressable market? Do we have any empirical data? Right. Everything is a test until that hypothesis is proven to be effective or not. So when you run your business, data-driven versus emotion versus excitement versus, oh my God, I got an idea. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? And you start saying, well, what's the data say?
Right.
And then you make that a part of your culture where everybody is saying, what's the data say? And then consensus, what does the team believe? So I've walked in, Sam, with, I think, legitimately well thought out, data-driven ideas, but the consensus of the team was, we don't have the manpower to do it, right? It's input-output. Like, it's a great idea, but we would need to hire like 7 more people that we don't have, incubate them, mature them, get them into the culture, develop them, then start creating the product. So that's a wonderful idea. When in 2019 did you want it?
Right.
Consensus-based, where I would be like, let's just go and move resources, and then something else gets hurt.
Right.
That's
and
how we govern.
One thing that's really interesting is that ability to bring the entire team in as equal partners.
Yes.
Where everybody's opinion, ideas, and thoughts and what they want to say is valued, taken in as the team, and then you benefit everyone.
And the key is that it's a safe environment for them to look at me and go, no.
Right.
Tom, that's awesome. Can we look at the numbers again? Because the numbers say no. And I'm like, but what about, because we're salespeople, right? As entrepreneurs, we want to sell our idea. No. And when you create that safe environment, that's when people grow. I mean, I was thinking of like books that inspire me. This guy, if you don't know, this is my mentor. He passed away September 2 years ago. Mike Vance, he was Walt Disney's right-hand man for the last 9 years of Walt's life. He was the dean of the Disney University. When Walt passed away, after he launched Epcot and everything else, his next project was Apple. Right? So, he was basically Steve Jobs' right-hand guy for, about 15 years. His whole thing was like, you've got to create an environment where people feel comfortable, right? They can express themselves. There's going to be conflict, there's going to be challenges, but it's going to be carefrontation, not confrontation.
Right.
I love you, so I'm going to tell you your idea is stupid.
Right.
And you're going to hear it because you know I love you.
The real
That's
kind
all
of,
from him.
it's the real safe space
It is.
where everyone can express whatever their idea
100%.
is and have that ability to not be concerned that they're going to be trashed as
Yes.
a person,
Yep.
but they're going to be, and that actually allows for the flowering of ideas, doesn't it? And the taking of to the next level.
Yep.
Now you mentioned your mentor. I want to hear Mike Vance. So how did you meet him? How did he become your mentor?
Yes.
And then what was the real impact on your life that he had?
Super profound. Can I answer the team question first really fast? Because I realized I didn't really answer your question.
No, you touched on it though.
So here's the thing, ready? I have I've been very blessed to have a lot of mentors. Last night I was with Bill Mitchell's daughter. Bill Mitchell's, if you're in Southern California or you're in housing, Bill retired a few years ago as Group Senior Vice President of a little company called the Irvine Company for Southern California. You know, 8 executives on the top floor with Donald Bren, the chairman, you know, $15, $16 billion a year business. I mean, huge company, in charge of all marketing. Bill would tell me from the time I was 20 on that whether you're a salesperson, an entrepreneur, a manager, a leader, if you're not recruiting talent all the time, if you're not interviewing people all the time, even when you don't need them, you're not doing your job. That a part of what we do as entrepreneurs is we're planting seeds for that future opportunity. So it used to drive my wife nuts because I would be meeting with what the team or my wife would say, why are you meeting with these strange people? Right? Like, we're not hiring right now. We don't need that job filled. And you're meeting with the chief revenue officer of 3 Day Blinds. Like, why are you meeting with him? We don't need a chief revenue officer. And he sells blinds. And I'm like, first, because he's a genius, right? And he's become a great friend. And Dan Williams, big shout out to you. And he shares ideas, and I share ideas with him. And who knows? Maybe in 6 years, he and I will start a business together. So I think the big mistake that a lot of people make is that you're not always in this, I'm going to meet future talent, I'm going to interview people all the time, because that's the only way you can to really grow a world-class team. Like, the mistakes that people make is they interview one person and hire them.
Interesting.
We interview, 15, 20. We start with a big group, narrow it down to a little group, get it down to the final 3, and then the consensus, everybody, Jessica over here on my team, everybody interviews them, everybody grills them to see, are they going to play well in our sandbox? Right? Like, to me, like, if you're not doing that, I don't care if you have 3 people on your team or 3,000 people on your team, a culture of interviewing all the time is critical to your success, because you never know when that perfect talent's going to walk in that can 10x your business or 2x your business or 3x a department or something inside your organization. So, Mike Vance.
Actually,
can
I jump in before
totally
Mike Vance? So, just as you're describing bringing these people in, you reminded me of your story about the babushka dolls, right? So, how are you going to, which babushka doll do you bring in, and what do entrepreneurs typically do when they're bringing in babushka dolls? Now,
so I don't know if you guys can see this on camera, but I will. I'll lift it up for you.
We might be able to.
I'll just kind of kind of see what's going on here. So I keep this on my desk as a constant reminder that when I started the organization, I was like, okay, I'm the CEO, this is awesome.
I'm the big babushka.
I'm the big dog. And then very quickly I thought about every one of my mentors who said, if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're screwed. If you're the most influential, the best salesperson, the most organized, the most efficient, the best with Excel, the best with finance, you're done. Right? Yeah. You're done, right? You need to basically know your lane, stay in your lane, and do that, and hire someone else that is going to be that expert in all those other lanes. And even if they're not as in your hallucination good as you, because they're going to be 100% dedicated to it, where you're like maybe 5% of your week dedicated to it, they're going to annihilate you just because of time and work ethic. So this is the constant reminder of, this is who I want to be in my organization. That if I was this guy, I'm screwed. And this is the opposite. We see people all the time that they're this, then they hire somebody less, then that person hires somebody less.
And it's a perpetuated habit through the organization.
And then next thing you know, I call and say, how's your business going? And they're like, well, it's terrible because I'm surrounded by idiots. And I was like, who's in charge of hiring?
Who brought those idiots in?
So it's just a good little visual reminder to make sure, and that's like, everyone knows that. Like, you can't be the smartest person in the room. You can't be the one with all the best ideas, And if you're doing that, you're really just, is it ethnocentric, narcissism, whatever you want to call it.
How insane would you have to go if you always have to micromanage what everybody else is doing because you feel like you do it better than everyone?
I have a hard enough time managing myself, let alone, you know, we have 150 full-time employees and 163 coaches. I'd go bananas, right?
And I think along the lines of that story is how you found the mentors, the people who have been influential in your life, how you surround yourself with that kind of above where you're at, because it influences who we are. And you talk about that in your book about you know the top 5 people, or the 5 people we spend the most time with, right? And then what kind of impact that has on us. So
spiritually, relationships, financially, health and vitality, 100%.
Absolutely. So now into the story. How do you surround yourself with Mike Vance? And you personally, what was that story, and what was the experience, and how did he say, you know, put his arm around you and say, I like you, I want to work, I want to be your mentor, and I want to make a difference with you.
So here's what's great. And again, I have an unfair advantage to most people. Number one is I've, from a very early age, brought more value to people in a relationship than they could bring to me. So I had future credit with a lot of people. You with me on this?
Yeah.
So when a lot of 20-year-olds were partying and hanging out and screwing around, I was basically hanging out with Brian Tracy. And is there anything I can do for you? Do you need me to, you know, help do registration at a seminar? Like, is there anything, like when I was 18 and my dad was the host of an infomercial, standing next to me is this big, tall dude, and I'm like, hey man, what's up? What's your story? He's like, I'm Tony Robbins. I'm like, hey man,
awesome.
like, and you know, a year and a half later, his 30 Days to Personal Power infomercial comes out. Because the guy that was doing the infomercial, the Guthrie Ranker Corporation, huge infomercial business, saw this guy and they're like, he's a star. Sign that guy. So, you know, you get lucky if you put yourself in situations that are outside of your comfort zone, outside of your city, outside of your marketplace. You know, and I was just going to seminars and events and networking and doing a lot of what like my clients do today, which is they're just cultivating these relationships around the country and around the world. So
and isn't that the law of the harvest, of planting seeds years and years and years before, and you're giving value without, it's not like, hey, quid pro quo, I'm going to do this and you're going to do this. It's just doing good and putting that kind of service and generosity with what you have to give. And eventually, somewhere it comes back. And so maybe some people say, oh, well, Tom Ferry has an unfair advantage. Well, give yourself an unfair advantage and start planting seeds for the next several years down the road.
Totally. It was actually funny. I was at a RE/MAX International conference, and Tony Heisch, who's the started Zappos, was backstage. And so he was going on, then I was going on. We were the morning keynotes of this event. And so, you know, he's got his posse there, right? Because he's a billionaire, rock star, right? And so, you know, the people that were in the green room were coming up, and a lot of them were like just talking at him, like, you know, I don't know, oh, you know, hey, Tony, you know, let me tell you what I'm doing, right? And then other people were asking him questions about, you know, what's the story of Zappos? Because if you met Tony or read his books, like,
it's an incredible story in and of itself.
He's an extraordinarily brilliant guy, but this whole happiness factor, like that's all the other gal who actually is the heart and soul of the business. Tony is like this methodical engineer, machine, sell the world. You know, I mean, that's like he's brilliant, right? Not a lot of charisma. Horrible presenter, sorry, like on stage, like because he's so. It's like watching Elon Musk talk, right? He's so brilliant that the average person in the room is just like, what the hell is he talking about, right? They're like, okay, I just buy shoes on Zappos, right? So I walked over to him and I'm like, hey man, nice to meet you. I'm speaking after you. Tell me, what are the 2 or 3 things you're going to talk about? And he's like, oh, well, I'm going to talk about this, this, and this. I was like, cool. I said, so what I talk about is this, this, and this. Do you see a connection? Can we connect the knots between the two? And he was like, well, tell me more about what you do. So like we actually engaged in a conversation because I wasn't coming up with, I was like just trying to be real, like you're going on, I'm going on next. It'd be nice for the audience if we were
to have a mesh transition between it, right?
And then I was like, I know, you know, everybody wants your attention. Is there anything I can help you with? I said, I know a lot of real estate agents. And he's like, yeah, I'm actually looking for a place in Vegas. And I was like, cool, right? So I hooked him up with a great broker in Vegas and he was like, thanks, that's awesome, right?
That's excellent.
And now, here's the reality. It's that one little moment. Maybe it'll turn into something in the future, more than likely not. But I focus on that kind of stuff all the time. So with Mike, here's what was great. He was not at the tail end of his career, but the world was shifting to a more online social environment. And so I reached out to him and I was like, hey, Mike, I'm like, you know, I've known him at that point since I was probably 25, right? So, you know, known him.
And that introduction was through
my dad would hire him to speak at events. And I was the young knucklehead sales guy who was in a suit, all excited, who, you know, would ask a few questions and sit in the front row and take more notes than anybody else and listen to all of his stuff and read all of his books and know his stories and know his quotes before he said them, like kind of not leaning in, obsessed. That's kind of the way I roll. So I call him and I'm like, I'd love to offer you like just some value around, you know, how you can upgrade your website, how you can make some adjustments. I launched my first website in 1995 and I'm looking at it and it's, you know, like, I don't know if does that make sense? He's like, well, you should really talk to my partner, Diane, who is a really good friend of mine now. And I'm like, okay, great. So I helped.
So you're giving that value right out the gate. You're saying, hey, I got this thing I could do for you and maybe would it be of value to you?
I was on your side. I wasn't like, hey, your site sucks, but it did. I was like, hey, you know, your site, like I just noticed like we're selling a lot of product. I don't know your product sales are, but if I can bring you value, he ditches me over to the gal. I help her a bunch. It gets better. He calls me like, you know, 90 days later and says, hey, I want to say thank you. Is there anything I can do to help? I said, gosh, matter of fact, I would love to be your mentee. I would love for you to coach me. And he's like, well, I haven't really coached anybody since Jack Welch. And I was like, Jack Welch? I was like, okay. I said, who else have you coached? He's like, well, Walt Disney coached me. He said, I guess technically the way you describe coaching, Steve Jobs, Mother Teresa, Jack Welch. And he's going through this list. And I was like, my next question, of course, was, you know, OMG, like, what's this going to cost? Right? So I said, well, how much would you charge me? And he said, well, why don't we do something like, you know, $4,000 or $5,000 a session? And I was like, well, how long's a session? And he's like
20 minutes.
He's like, no, he goes, we would spend like an hour. He goes, because, you know, I want to exchange with you and ideas. And I was like in my thought was like, can I get like 10-minute increments or something? Because it was such an outlandish number for me at that time. So I basically took some money out of my savings account and I said, in our first session, could we go face to face? Like, I'll pay you $12,000. I'll fly to you in Florida. He said yes. It was awesome. I flew to Florida. I landed at the hotel. I took a red eye in, and you know, so I'm already a little, you know, red eye-ish. You know, landing at like 7 o'clock in the morning in Miami, and going to the hotel. And I meet him there, and he's this enormous guy, 6'6", big hair, you know, huge personality,
just a great presence.
And I mean, like Walt Disney legitimately said, like in quotes, Mike Vance is the most creative man in the world.
That's awesome,
right? Like that's coming from Walt Disney, like that's pretty.
You don't
insane,
get better than
right?
that.
And then I'm thinking about his track record of who he's worked with. He invented the salad bar, right? That was his invention, right? So if you ever had a salad bar, thank my mentor. He said, so what do you want to accomplish today? And I said, I'm in a place in my life where I feel like I'm at a crossroads. And you know, every entrepreneur's been there, right? Where you kind of your whole world is going right, but your heart's going left. And I said, I don't know how to bridge the gap between my whole world and my heart. And I said, but the farther I get away from my heart, the more my world seems kind of inauthentic and like I'm making money and I'm successful and people think that like everything is rosy, but in my heart I just wasn't feeling it. So he's like, well, let's figure out how we can align the two. And he said, this is great. This is typical Mike Vance. Do you like espresso? I said, sure. And I wasn't a coffee drinker. Sure, okay. And he's like, Cuban coffee? I'm like, what's that?
Okay,
great. I've had Cuban coffee at 9 o'clock in the morning after a red eye. No, it's, I don't know. It's like cocaine would be my guess. Like you're wired. So we have a couple Cuban coffees, which is kind of his process to get the ideas flowing. And we're brainstorming. He's asking me questions. What makes your heart sing? You know, he asked me 5 questions that were to this day.
Like, what are those 5 questions?
Okay, I don't want to screw this up. Ready? Question number 1. Now, heads up. This is what he said to me. So if you take the time to answer these questions, let me back up. I asked him a question. What is it that Mike Vance, Mother Teresa, Walt Disney, Jack Welch, Steve Jobs, all these what do they all have in common? And he said, well, they've all answered the 5 questions and they live by them.
Interesting.
So my list of 25 questions I was going to ask him, I'm like, screw that. What are the 5 questions? And he's like, number 1 is what's your purpose? There you go. And then we sat for like what felt like an hour, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning. He's now bringing wine in, so it's Cuban coffee. Now we're drinking wine.
You're up, and then now you're calm.
It's 10 o'clock because he wants me loose, right? So I'm like, all right, it's 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm drinking with this guy, cool. And so we're getting loose, and he's like, you have to figure out like what is it you really want? Like what makes your heart sing? Why are you on this planet? Not why are you in Miami? Not why are you on this show? Why are you here?
not just the first answer, oh, this is what it should be in my mind. Like, I think it should be this. It's much deeper than that.
Deeper and deeper. And he kept saying, so what else? What else? And what would that do for you? And what would that do for you? And what would that do for you? And what I got at the end is I wanted two things, happiness and impact. Right? Like,
Incredible.
that's why I'm on this planet. Like, I want to impact people and I want to be happy, right? It's easy, right? Like, but it took, I want to, you know, be an author and I want to write books and I want to do this and I want to build a company and I want to make money. And he's like, incredible. Well, what's all that mean?
But that becomes the standard. That's the benchmark to measure everything else that we're doing. Does it lead to that benchmark? And if it doesn't lead to that benchmark, then we kick it out.
And if you think about it, what I was saying is my whole life and world was going this way, impact, but my heart was going this way, lack of happiness. Right? So how do you bridge the gap? So the second question was, and I can't believe I'm going to screw this up. What's your purpose? What's your God-given talent? The third one was, oh man, not what's the highest and best use of your time, but it was like, you know, what do you do that's so effortless that you could do it all day long, and whether it made you money or not, it wouldn't make a difference. And then question number 5 was like, it's 20 years from now. You've achieved everything you wanted to achieve. What does your life and look like? And how is the world experiencing you?
Right.
And
that's incredible.
You know, red-eye flight, not a lot of sleep, Cuban coffee, you know,
relaxing on the Chardonnay now.
and this force is asking me these questions. And it got clearer.
You have to answer it. You have to get that answer out.
That was the only reason I was there. I came in with a list of questions and an agenda. None of that stuff got addressed. Right? He went right to my heart, right to my head. And he's like, this is what all the extraordinary people they know their purpose. They know their God-given talents, right? They know their DNA, and they don't worry about all the other stuff. They get the bigger babushka dolls to handle that stuff, right? And then you start honing in on this. And then the last question he asked was so beautiful. He said, so let's say you're there. You're there now. It's 20 years from now. Who are you being in that moment? And it was the first time somebody said to me, a lot of people talk about what they have to do in order to have the things they want, so someday they can be happy and know that they made an impact. And I was like, oh. And he goes, but see, Tom, you're young. Like, this is a new world. And this guy, he's
why wait until down the road?
Who do you need to be? Be that person now as an entrepreneur. And that was fantastic, because it put me on this journey of this self-discovery around my values, around my rules to achieve my values. And like, just that alone was devastating to actually say, here's a value ranking of truly what's important to me. Because I remember asking him the whole value conversation, like, how does that all line up? And he's like, look, you're going to get 1,000 inputs a day, right? 60,000 marketing messages a day if you're a normal human being. All this input coming in, what is the filter it runs through? So if you're not set on who you are, what you believe, how your DNA is set up, your values, if you're not set in the rules to achieve them, you're never going to find happiness. You're going to be chasing all the time. All your goals will be on someday isle, you know, that island way out there that has all of your happiness on it. He's like, you got to decide who you're going to be now. And then every day forward, be that person. Well, I left the family business that I was running, that I'd grown from, you know, a small, wonderful little family business.
Which was that side that was going off the direction.
But all of my family members, all my siblings, all their spouses, you know, some of my closest friends on the planet, all these amazing clients, all these amazing relationships, and I followed my heart. Hardest thing I ever did.
Incredible.
Yeah.
You know what I find?
He is responsible.
That's so powerful because it takes all the other factors. It's important for our entrepreneurs to find their clients, to get new business, but it's not only important to find the right client or find the right entrepreneur, mentor that you could bring into your life, the right coach, but it's so important to be the right entrepreneur, to be the right person.
I think it's everything.
Then all of those other things will naturally attract to who you are.
Attract, yes, but I don't want to go law of attraction woo-woo like, you know.
Not exactly.
But it's more like, if I be the right thing, then the doing is more automatic.
It feels more natural.
Yeah,
it's not forced, it's not fake.
Yeah.
And I think people want authenticity. That's what
I take think out of that equation.
Yeah, exactly.
People demand authenticity.
Right, and so if you if you can then be the right kind of person you want to be, because you've done this exercise of defining what it is you really want to be, then you can be authentic in a new way that now the people around you are going to be like, yeah, he's authentic. And people wonder, ask the question, well, how do you develop trust with your clients? There's all these techniques, things you can do, but ultimately all the techniques and strategies are meaningless unless we have that core of authenticity, because that's actually, the speed of trust is like that fast. And when authenticity is there, the other person is authentic, you can immediately sense that. And I've experienced it, you've experienced, where you come 100%. Across somebody and you just know, you're like, that person is authentic. I want to be connected with that because I value that. And I think that's
the phrase I hear the most from people is, that gal's real.
Right.
Like, what you see is what you get. She's real. And I think it's interesting as I mature, right? I'm 47 and I'm on a path to 50 right now, and I'm passionate about it. As I get closer to that, the only thing I think about is just be me. There's 7.3 billion people on the planet. I have zero interest in pleasing all of them. Right. Some are going to like me. The vast majority will never know me. And some are going to hate my guts, and it doesn't matter what I do, and I don't care.
So who are you? You say, just be me. What is me? Like, how would you define that?
Fully expressed, enormous capacity to care, super calculated, right? Very, very organized with my mind, not necessarily with my environment.
Sure.
You with me? Extremely disciplined, a very loving husband, right? I'm married for 24 years, coming up on 25. And look at my town, like 72% divorce rate in my town. So like my wife and I like pinky promise, like often like, baby, we ain't going anywhere. And at the end of the day, like I posted something on Instagram recently. I had just this insanely proud moment, like looking at my two boys that are 16 and 18, and I actually wrote almost in tears, like, I've been very blessed to accomplish some pretty cool things in my life, but nothing greater than them. And at the end of the day, when I think about happiness and impact, it starts with my family, it starts with my friends, it starts with my team, it starts with my clients. I just stay in that.
So how does an entrepreneur, let's speak to our entrepreneurs out there, real estate entrepreneurs or any other kind of entrepreneur, what is it that they can do to become who they know they want to be? Maybe they see where they're at now, maybe find some peace and satisfaction that they're there, and even looking forward to becoming something. So I think you can, on one level, it's accepting who you are and being satisfied and happy with that. But at the same time becoming, because we don't want to just be stagnant, right? No, so wherever you are, whether it's like, oh, I'm down in the dumps,
none of them are satisfied. No one watching this is satisfied. Dissatisfaction is a symptom of ambition.
Isn't that wonderful?
Right. So
and it drives us forward. So then, what are the things? Okay, here I'm here where I am. I can be okay with that because I know I can become better. So what is it that they do to become better? What is that?
So no one's going to like the answer, but the answer is the answer is the answer is the answer is that it's two things. You got to let go to grow, right? That you got to shed old thoughts, old beliefs, old ways of being, old work ethic, old discipline, old strategy, old system to grow, right? So many of us, it's like, we had new ideas, right, all the time, and new processes and a new approach and maybe some new marketing.
But are we not letting something go?
Well, the problem is we might be operating in a sewer, right? So like if, your head and your systems and your process are out of whack, right? So you got to let go to grow. And then the second thing that most people don't get is there is so much growth in pain and suffering and hardship that's what gives us the grit. Like every entrepreneur should go online. They should Google the grit score by Michelle, and I can't think of her last name. And you take this test, and it basically tells you, like, this is how gritty you are. Like gritty, coachable, right? Like those two things are two of the most important skills. Like, will I follow through and do the work no matter what? Will I do 12 to 18-hour days, 7 days a week to start my business? And if you won't, you're never going to be successful. Sorry. I don't know a successful person on the planet that did not work their face off nonstop for the first 7 to 10 years, right? I'm 14 years into this business. I'm 29 years into my career. When I was a young sales guy, like, I may sound like, oh, I know what I want, and my values are all aligned. 29 years later, but like early on, here was my solution. Just work harder than everybody.
Right.
Get to the office at 7 o'clock in the morning, put 2 headsets on, dial 2 phones simultaneously.
Which had value in and of itself, but there's more than that, right?
There is more than that, but the problem is there's no easy path.
Right.
Like the path is the path is the path, right? There's a reason why 96% of the people that watch this show won't ever get over $1 million in revenue, right?
Because they're not willing to let go of something and they're not willing to do something.
That's exactly, you have to do the work. Like, sorry boys and girls, like you got to do the work.
Right.
And
there's no free lunch here.
Yeah, everything else is the sort of emotional journey of your life, right? All that sort of happening simultaneously. You're trying to figure you out while you're trying to figure out your client, while you're trying to figure out your service offering, while you're trying to figure out your delivery mechanism, while you're trying to figure out client experience, while you're trying to figure out profitability and your relationship and your kids and your friends and your health and your spirituality and your money.
And when you have those challenges,
it's a pain in the ass.
And it makes you authentic, right?
It does.
When you have those challenges and you have to, you suffer through difficult things, and by the sweat of your brow, you're able to accomplish things. It's through that challenge that it builds your character, and then you can be compassionate and you can lift other people around you, and it actually builds into that authenticity that people need.
It's like Jack Welch. Jack Welch, who was Neutron Jack for the first like 25 years of his career, and then he tried to be Nice Jack. Like he was like, you're either number 1 or number 2 in your division, in your deal, or we're shutting you down.
Right.
Like that was Neutron Jack, and he fired a lot of people because they weren't willing to do what it took to be number 1 or number 2 in their space.
Right.
And then the last 10 years of his career, he's like, let's create a university, let's help people.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yes.
So we have some participants here that have
I know a few
chimed
of these people.
in.
Cool.
So let's go ahead and get in here. And so we've got a couple of people. So let's jump into our first person that joined, Martha Cervantes.
Yes.
She was actually chimed in very early on the call, and she's been linked in here. So we're going to allow you, Martha, to get in on the conversation. And let's see, you've got, let's unmute you so you can go ahead and share some of your thoughts. So we're going to unmute there. All right, so 1 second, and then we're going to also follow. Who's another one on here that you?
I mean, I know a bunch of them, but Martha doesn't look. Oh, now she's unmuted. Go back. Let's see here. I know that guy.
Okay.
I know that guy. I know
so
that gal. I mean, like
we'll grab that. We'll grab a couple more here.
This is a really good entrepreneur right here, also. That guy.
Okay.
Yep.
Sounds good. So Martha, go ahead and ask a quick question here on the Entrepreneurship Radio Show. You've got Tom's attention.
You're amazing. You inspire me. And you know what? Seriously, my life has changed since I've started coaching with you. And I've literally been...
All right. So
Martha, we lost you there, but... Oh, there we go.
Go ahead one more time with your thought.
Yeah, you know, like I said, you know, my life has changed since I started coaching with your group. And I was going to start reading, Keep Failing Forward, when I saw your name come up, and I've just been taking notes nonstop. And one of the things that I've personally been working on, Tom, is just letting go so I can grow.
Yeah.
So how did you learn early on just to really just let go of the minutia that wasn't serving you well?
So it was, Martha, first of all, thank you, and lots of love to you and your family, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and wishing you 2018 your best year ever. So Martha, rather than going through all the pain and hardship, read this book, right? Read this book. I don't know if you can see it live on Facebook or Instagram. The book is called The Growth Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck, right? This is a more analytical approach. A lot of people I know read the first like 4 or 5 chapters and they were like, ooh, it's kind of heady. And you know, she's clearly, this is not a motivational book. She's a therapist, she's a psychologist, she's a doctor. All of the meat and the how-to is back here. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. A few that are inside here. Number one is the act of writing it down and actually creating awareness around it. Good example, I was with a friend last night at dinner, like writing down the, you know, hey, what I'm doing right now in my business isn't working. Everything I put into it so far is not working. Like that awareness is really hard. So do you shut it down? Do you pivot? Do you try a new approach? He was also admitting that he hasn't been very coachable, that he's not allowing a lot of outside input into his business. And he's not in real estate. He's very, very successful in one side, but this new venture, he's just getting his butt kicked. Right? So awareness is a big part of it. It's always the first step of change. You know, hello, my name is, and I'm an alcoholic, right? Until you can do that, you can't make changes. So you saw the questions that I posted. What do you really want for 2018? What do you need to let go of? And then what new routines and skills and beliefs do you need to put in place in order to make it more natural and automatic? Spend a lot of time doing some self-reflection. What in my life doesn't work? What in my health doesn't work? What in my relationships doesn't work? What in my home environment doesn't work? What in my business doesn't work? You remember at the summit we talked about, you know, if Amazon got into real estate, how they would spend all of their time looking at the pain points of the real estate transaction, and they would work diligently with tremendous focus to eliminate the pain points. You eliminate the pain points, you create a smoother transaction, you make it easier for people to buy, you win. It's the same thing, except we're doing it to ourselves. So Martha, that's my advice. I hope that helps.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks, Tom. We'll go ahead and grab one more while we're on the radio. And then we might, if you're into it, we could actually wrap up the radio show and continue to take a couple questions on Facebook if you want to.
If you guys want to, I'm all good with that.
So we'll go ahead and do
Nazar.
Nazar. Let's go ahead and link Nazar on here. Go ahead and Nazar, would you go ahead and introduce yourself and ask the question that you had, or give your thought?
You guys hear me?
Yep,
yes,
we can hear you, buddy.
All right. Tom, you talked about being incongruent.
Say that again, buddy. I can barely hear you.
You talked about being incongruent.
Incongruent.
It's what your passion was and where you're making money at.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit more about how to put that together?
So Nazar, you know, we've known each other for a while, so you know that I was doing very similar work, but the methodologies that I was presenting were not mine. So I was basically beating somebody else's drum, metaphorically, and what I wanted to teach, what I wanted to do, what I wanted to impact people on, I wasn't allowed to do, nor should I do, because I was working for someone else. So the big decision for me was actually rather simple, to sort of codify what is the Tom Ferry methodology and then make that available so my heart and my mission were completely aligned. So it really is that simple. You know, for you in your real estate brokerage, it might be just simply the evolution of, you know, you never go on another listing presentation as long as you're alive. Right? If that no longer serves you, if that no longer feels like the right direction. And I know that's an extreme thought, but you know, I was with a friend recently, used to be the former CEO of Keller Williams, Chris Heller, and you know, he has a team in San Diego that sells 160 homes a year. He lives in Austin, Texas, and hasn't been on a listing appointment since like 2010. So it's that same thing, like what got you here, Nazar, won't get you there. So, you know, you and I are close. You should probably send me an email unless you want to share more here. Like, what specifically are you struggling with?
Well, we're going to take a quick break to check out of the radio show. So thanks so much to our listeners in Salt Lake City, K-Talk AM 1640. And thanks for listening to the Entrepreneurship Radio Show. You can check out information at tomferry.com to find out more about his book, Mindset, Model, and Marketing. And we'll go ahead and continue the conversation now on Facebook if you wanted to, and answer a couple more questions. So let's pick someone here.
So I'd love to help. Well, Nazar.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did that help,
let's wrap up that part, and then we'll go ahead to the next one. Go ahead.
Nazar, does that make sense?
Yeah, it helped.
You and I can go pretty. Yeah, you and I can go pretty deep. Send me an email, because maybe you don't want to share it here live, but I know that there's something going on inside you that, you know, we're always working on this together, right? Aligning, you know, joy and happiness with work. Yeah. So let me know what's going on, buddy. Okay, let's go to John.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks, man.
So Sam, we are off air, so you know.
Very good. Thanks, Patrick. All right, so we've got John. Thank you so much for joining us here. We're going to go ahead and give you a chance to talk to Tom. 1 second, let me unmute you here. Make sure we can hear you. All right. So it should give us access to. So now, how do you know John?
John is muted. John Stenberg is a longtime, business friend, great entrepreneur. Built a couple companies. Has a beautiful wife, has a beautiful family.
Very good.
Is living, to me, the entrepreneurial dream. So, what's up, Mr. Stenberg? What's happening?
Hey, Tom. Good to hear from you. Great show, by the way.
Thank you, man.
And my question to you is how complacency.
How to beat complacency.
That's entrepreneurial.
Yeah. So
how to beat it.
Yeah. So look, it's interesting you say that because I went through a little of that in October of this year. I confessed to my coach that I had basically achieved the single most important goal that I had for this year. I had achieved, and it felt like after I checked that off, that some of the wind in my sail, if you will, metaphorically, felt like it slowed down a little bit.
Interesting.
So just keeping it real. It happens to all of us, right? So for me, it was a couple different things. First, very quickly identifying it, acknowledging it, celebrating it. My number one goal was my wife's health and vitality. She battled breast cancer last year. When we got sort of the final doc approved and some homeopathic stuff approved, I was like, mission achieved, right? Like, yes, we did it. So we celebrated that. And then I took a couple of days just to reflect. And the question I'm asking everybody is, knowing what you know now, what do you really, 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 really want? John, at your level, you're already wildly successful. So it's probably not, a few more shekels in the bank. It's probably not a car. It's probably not a house. My hallucination is it's probably going to be more about experiences, right? Memories, time, and how you feel. So what I'm asking my very best is to write down your top 3 goals for the year and then ask yourself, when I get there, what does it mean?
And maybe they're not the number goals. Maybe it's a time goal or it's a memory goal.
For sure.
And sure, there's numbers behind it.
Of course.
But there's something more intangible.
Yes. And so there's that tangible and intangible goal.
More tangible from the
vitality and all that stuff. Relationship with my spouse.
Absolutely.
Time with my kids. But what I want to know is, what does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? So John, I want you to go deeper into the value conversation to find what it is that you really want. And then the expression of it in 2018 would be, Sam, these vacations with my kids and this much money in the bank or this many transactions or this time with my spouse or this level of health and vitality. Right. But I really want you to lock in on what it really means to you. And then the second thing I'll tell you that I did, I immediately signed up for Dr. Peter Diamandis. He's got a mastermind group called A360. And John, you've known me for a long time. It has nothing to do with what I currently do. The mission of this mastermind, get this, show up prepared to answer what you believe is the world's biggest challenge and how you plan to solve it. That's a tall order. This is, Diamandis wrote Bold and Abundance. He's the, the creator of the X Prize. And I'm going in kind of nervous, right?
How are you going to make that difference?
Exactly.
What's that impact you're going to make?
So John, putting yourself in a situation where you're uncomfortable, but you got a growth mindset, so you're not going to shrink with it. I'm uncomfortable and I'm excited, and I'm actually I'm admitting this right now, I'm so lame that I'm actually like inviting some other entrepreneurial friends to be there so I'm not alone. Like I'm that much of a candy ass. Like
come on, buddy, I need a wingman.
I do. I was pinging my buddy this morning from Vienna who is this rock star like John, and I'm like, dude, you got to join this thing. And he's like, are you afraid to go alone? I was like, I'm not afraid to go alone, but I'd love to have a buddy.
That's awesome.
So, strength in numbers, right, John?
Excellent.
Yeah, dude, it's not going to be another car. It's not going to be more money. It's, not for you. You're a healthy guy. I think it's all going to come down to the life journey, the mission, the experiences and the memories you want. Think about how we were raised, the goods and the bads, the lessons learned. I'm just super fixated. I'm on the other side of it, buddy. You got young kids. I've got a 16 and 18-year-old. I'm about to be an empty nester. Right, I'm thinking about hiring a therapist to try and figure out what that's like, because I don't know. So I'm just John, lean in to the stuff that you're interested in that you don't know. Lean in to the passions. Lean in to the things that are maybe inspiring for you, and that could be like being at your kid's school 3 days a week and reading books and participating, because it makes your heart sing.
It's interesting because that mastermind group that you're talking about, it's what you can give.
Bingo.
Because you've been blessed with so many things, however you want to call it. You have so many resources at your disposal.
Yes.
Now what can you do to actually have a positive, really good impact on that impact that you're going to make?
Impact.
Which is that becomes a core, that's part of your core values. What is that impact? And there's so much satisfaction, and I think that as we even experiment with that along the way, what can we give give along the way, then it develops and it allows our minds to get to that next level of, okay, now I've been giving, and that's developing more ways to give in my mind that maybe if I hadn't had the giving experience and practice, I wouldn't have gotten to this level. So I think even the practice of giving
100%.
can then get us to that point where now, how can we give to our community, to the world, right? What
John knows, and many of these people that are my friends out there know, my buddy Thatch Nguyen, who actually created a game called the Contribution Game. And so he would throw these networking events and say, all right, walk around the room, ask everybody you can in the next hour, what is their most important goal, and how can you contribute to them? And like that, like it's a metaphor for life, right? Like, are you an energy-sucking vampire, a leech that takes, or do you generally care, like someone like John does, and all these other amazing people, and then contribute to them, right? Even on the smallest scale, a relationship, a connection, support, you know, an idea, whatever it may be. So, John, sound cool?
It sounds great. Thank you so much for the advice. I'll see you next month.
Cool, man. Can't wait.
Thanks, John.
All right, we got time for one more. Let's
There
go.
we go.
Let's find. Let me just look down. Look at the list.
Okay.
Sorry, everybody. I know there's a bunch of you. Let's go, Maureen, because yeah, there we go.
All right, let's get Maureen. Can you introduce her? Who's Maureen?
I can't. I know the name, but I don't have enough context. So Maureen's got to tell me.
All right, now you're on, Maureen. Go ahead and introduce yourself and share your thoughts.
Hi, Tom. It's Maureen McDermott from Santa Barbara, California.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. It's been a long time.
Yes.
A long time.
I was like, I know that, Maureen, I know the name, and now I hear the voice. I'm like, I know who this is. That's
there it
good.
is. Awesome.
Of course you know who it is. Anyway, I followed you. It's been great. I'm looking forward to probably seeing you in January. What do you think are the most important things that somebody should set out as their goals for 2018? Like you have evolved a lot over the last many years.
Yeah. So I think Maureen.
I know that's a very broad question.
Yeah. So I can contextualize it by saying to you, there's no bad goals. I think it really comes down to maybe you with a yellow notepad, and I know we all want to use technology, and I'm a big tech fan. So unless you got the iPad Pro with a pen, there's something about writing that gets it out of the brain and the heart and the head and the body and onto paper. I would just sit down, Maureen, and ask yourself that question. What do I really, 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 really want in 2018? If 2018 was going to be my best year ever, what do I really want? What you and I both know is your business is basically the engine that could fire all of your dreams. Right? You are, first of all, you live in Santa Barbara, so most of the world is already like, screw you. You live in Santa Barbara? Like, that's not fair, right? So you live in an amazing place. I would ask the 5 equities. How is your health? How is your relationship? How's your money? How's your business? And how's your spirit? And I would ask you to consider maybe that as a framework for your goals, and then, you know, run to tomferry.com if you already haven't done it, and build your business plan around the achievement of the things that you want. Money's just a tool, right? So you're blessed, you can make a lot of money, we can all make a lot of money, but money is just a tool to get you the things that you really want, the memories, the experiences, the life, the trips, the security, the safety, whatever it may be. So Maureen, I'll tell you the 3 things I hear the most from people, and I was in Dallas yesterday, I saw your mom yesterday, who just, I love.
She's incredible.
She's amazing, and what most people wrote down when I said, what are your top 3 goals? It was relationship, health, money. Those 3 things, right? Relationship, that seems to be the common trend amongst most rock stars. So Maureen, I don't know if I answered that other than maybe just giving you some thoughts to think about. And then I would just say to you, make sure you get to the website, build your business plan if you already haven't done so, and then don't ask anybody else what their goals are, right? Not in a closed-minded, fixed mindset way, but don't let them sway you. Right? Sit with a yellow notepad, stare out at the ocean, look at, you know, a beautiful landscape, go to a place that inspires you, and say, knowing what I know now, what do I really, really, really want?
Right.
And let your head and your heart work together in that symbiotic way to start mapping out what you want 2018 to be, and then you know all the exercises. Get it into your schedule, get it into a routine. If it's not in your, if it's not a schedule and a routine and it's not on a map for the year, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and
Does that make sense?
You figure out those logistics, but then make the real dream happen.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
We got to bounce. So all my friends out there, send me a message on Facebook. If there's a question, you can DM me, right? But I got to bounce right now. So thank you all for all my friends that are out there. And Sam.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you,
really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And thanks to all of you for listening to the Entrepreneurship Radio Show here with Tom Ferry. Join us next time. The show is brought to you by Wilkinson Financial LLC and the Tom Ferry Show today. So thanks so much. Have a great one.
Take care.